The CEO thought he was being tricked into marrying a faceless, unwanted bride, but the moment he lifted her veil, everything changed. The heavy wooden doors of the Prescott estate groaned open as Ethan stepped into the grand hall. Every step echoed across the marble, sharp and cold. The house smelled the same, polished oak, expensive perfume, but tonight it reeked of something else. Betrayal. He had been dragged away from New York, pulled straight out of a critical investor meeting. No explanation, just a call from his parents demanding he return to Boston. He expected family drama, maybe even a scandal, but not this. "I hope this isn't what I think it is," Ethan muttered, striding into the sitting room where his parents sat like rulers on thrones. His father, William Prescott, folded his newspaper with military precision. His mother, Eleanor, pearls glinting at her throat, wore that same calm, unreadable mask that once rattled Wall Street itself. "We're not asking," William said flatly. "You're getting married." Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it, just sharp disbelief. "You can't be serious." "She's a good girl," Eleanor replied coolly. "Kind, quiet, from a modest background, yes, but respectable." "A modest background?" Ethan scoffed. "What does that mean?" "She doesn't come from money." "She has character," William cut in. "Grace, and she once did something for this family we can never repay." "So this is charity," Ethan snapped, turning toward the fire. "Or worse, debt repayment." "This is not punishment." Eleanor's tone turned steel. "It's a chance. For both of you," his voice rose. "You expect me to marry someone I've never seen? Someone too ashamed to even show her face? You want me to stand at the altar and gamble on that?" "She wears a veil for personal reasons," William said firmly. "And you will respect that." "That's exactly what I won't do," Ethan shot back. "How can I trust someone who hides behind fabric?" "You'll meet her tomorrow," Eleanor said, rising to her feet, her words like a commandment. "And you will treat her with decency." "I don't owe her anything." "You owe this family everything." William's eyes narrowed. "And mark my words, son, you'll see. She's worth more than you think." Ethan stormed out, fury burning through him. He poured a glass of whiskey and stepped onto the veranda, but even the cool night air couldn't cool his anger. The next evening, the house fell into an unnatural silence. Even the staff moved like shadows, as if they were preparing for a funeral instead of a meeting. Ethan stood in the drawing room, adjusting the cuffs of his black shirt. His mother entered, followed by a tall woman in a cream dress. His gaze snapped to her instantly. She moved with grace, her head bowed, her face hidden behind a sheer veil that fell past her chest. Only her golden hair and a pair of calm, solemn eyes showed. Ethan's jaw hardened. "This is Lillian Moore," Eleanor said smoothly. "Lillian, this is Ethan." "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Prescott," she said softly, her voice even and steady. Ethan said nothing. No smile, no handshake, just a cold, assessing stare. Lillian stood her ground, silent, unshaken by his hostility. But Ethan's irritation boiled beneath the surface. "No scar, no explanation, just mystery. Are you going to say anything?" Eleanor hissed at him. He gave the barest nod before turning away. In his mind, the judgment was made. She might be kind, quiet, everything his parents claimed, but to him, she was still a stranger wrapped in secrets. And he had no interest in unwrapping them. Not now. Not ever. The Prescott estate glittered that night. Chandeliers rained gold over walls draped with roses. White blooms lined every corridor, while tuxedoed waiters glided silently, serving champagne as a string quartet played a haunting melody. But beneath the glamour, the air was tight, heavy. As though the guests themselves were holding their breath, the whispers started almost immediately. "Have you seen her? She always wears that veil. Who marries a woman they've never seen? Is she sick? Hiding something? Must be a debt. No one does this unless they owe someone big." Ethan stood at the altar, stiff in his tailored navy suit, jaw locked in stone. He didn't scan the crowd. He didn't care. He just wanted it finished. Then, the music shifted, heads turned as the bride appeared at the far end of the hall, walking slowly down the aisle on the arm of a distant relative, and suddenly the Whispers died, but the tension only thickened. Lillian Moore walked down the aisle in a gown that was nothing like the lavish designer dresses expected of a Prescott bride. It was simple, modest, elegant in a way that seemed almost defiant. Her face was still hidden beneath a sheer white veil, the faintest glimpse of long golden hair and muted grey-blue eyes peeking through. She moved with quiet grace, her steps steady, her poise unshaken by the stares and whispers around her. When she reached the altar, Ethan didn't offer his hand. Lillian folded hers neatly in front of her. The officiant hesitated, uncomfortable, then pressed forward. The vows came and went without warmth. Ethan recited his as if signing a business contract, detached and cold. Lillian's voice was quiet but unwavering, as though she had accepted this fate long before. "And now," the officiant said, attempting cheer, "you may kiss the bride." A ripple of anticipation swept through the crowd. Guests leaned forward, eager, desperate to see the mystery unveiled. Ethan paused. Then, deliberately, he leaned in and pressed a kiss, not to her lips, not even to her cheek, but to the edge of the veil. A gesture without contact, without emotion. A performance for formality's sake. The applause that followed was thin, forced, echoing hollowly through the ballroom. The reception mirrored the wedding itself. Grand, glittering, and utterly lifeless. Ethan barely remained at the head table, drifting away repeatedly to answer calls and entertain investors. He didn't glance at Lillian. He didn't speak to her. She sat in silence, composed, answering politely to those who dared approach her. The veil never left her face, not even once. By night's end, the ballroom felt less like a celebration and more like a museum. Ornate, expensive, and cold. Ethan slipped away to the library for a drink. Tradition dictated Lillian follow. When she entered, he was already at the bar, pouring whiskey into crystal. He didn't offer her a glass. "You could have at least pretended to enjoy it," he muttered bitterly, not turning. She stood still. Then came her quiet reply. "I didn't come here to play pretend." He faced her now, glass in hand, his voice sharp. "Then why are you here? What are you hiding, Lillian? What's so terrible beneath that veil that you can't even look your own husband in the eye?" The firelight shimmered across her veil as she stood unflinching. "You think this is love?" He pressed, frustration biting. "You show up, say nothing, and expect me to just accept this as fate?" Her voice, soft but steady, cut through the silence. "I never expected you to accept anything." "Then what?" Ethan snapped. "You think you earned this marriage because my parents owe you something?" "I never asked for anything," she said calmly. "Oh, come on. A poor girl suddenly married into one of Boston's wealthiest families, and I'm supposed to believe you didn't want that?" Her head tilted, her voice unshaken. "I never asked to be your wife." She stepped closer. Not in anger, not in defiance, but firm, steady, like someone who had already decided who she was. Her words fell like stone. "I never asked anyone to repay me. I never asked for favors. And I certainly never asked you to love me." For the first time, Ethan's sharp tongue failed him. He stared at her, really stared, but the veil stood between them like a wall. And for the first time that night, something crept into his chest he hadn't expected. Doubt. After the wedding, the Prescott estate grew unnervingly quiet. Not the elegant stillness it was known for, but a heavier silence, the kind that lives between two strangers forced to share the same walls. Ethan carried on as if nothing had changed. He rose early for the office, often leaving breakfast untouched. Some nights he didn't return until after midnight. Others, he slept in a guest room or hunched over his laptop in the study until dawn. He and Lillian rarely spoke. They shared a house, but not a life. Even the staff noticed. The maids whispered outside the master suite, their footsteps hushed. Harold, the butler, once suggested moving dinner to a smaller room so it might feel less distant. Ethan ignored him. And yet, Lillian adapted to the house quietly, almost invisibly. She didn't intrude on Ethan's routine. Instead, she slipped into the rhythm of the estate like she had always belonged there. She woke early, sometimes helping in the kitchen, though no one expected her to. She remembered the staff's names. She asked about their families. She learned the gardener's wife suffered from arthritis, and the housekeeper's son had just started college. Every afternoon, she brewed tea for Mrs. Langley, the cook, complimenting her spice blends so earnestly it brought tears to the woman's eyes. But most of all, she tended to Ethan's mother. Eleanor Prescott, once formidable, untouchable, had grown frail. Her hands trembled, dizzy spells came often, her breathing shallow, and Lillian was always there. Eleanor hated doctors unless absolutely necessary. But Lillian noticed the little things, the nausea that kept Eleanor from finishing meals, the way she shivered when the air grew cold, the stiffness in her shoulders when cushions were too firm. Lillian adjusted it all, a heated blanket, softer pillows, gentle reminders to rest. And when Eleanor couldn't climb the stairs, Lillian sat with her downstairs, reading from old Prescott novels in a voice so steady it filled the silence. No one asked her. She just did it. One evening, Ethan was in the library pouring himself another drink when a sound stopped him. Laughter. Soft. Unfamiliar. He frowned, set the glass down, and drifted toward the drawing room. His mother sat on the couch, shawl wrapped around her frail shoulders. Beside her, Lillian arranged a tray of herbal tea and fruit. Firelight painted them in gold. "You know," Eleanor said gently, "you have a way of seeing people, reading them. It's a gift." Beneath the veil, Lillian smiled faintly. "Only because I've spent most of my life being observed." Eleanor reached over, touched her hand with surprising tenderness. "I don't care what people say. You're the best thing to happen to this house in years. I'm just trying to be useful. You already are." They sat in silence, sipping tea, watching the flames dance. Ethan stepped back before they noticed him. He returned to the library, downed his whiskey in one swallow. The warmth burned his throat, but did nothing to loosen the knot forming in his chest. Later that week, Ethan walked with his mother in the garden after dinner. The lavender twilight hung low, the air cool. "Mother?" he asked, keeping his eyes forward. "What is it? What is it about her?" His voice was low, almost reluctant. "You were so against this marriage. Now you treat her like she belongs here." Eleanor stopped, turned to face him. "She does. More than you know." Ethan frowned. "What did she do?" Her expression softened. "She saved my life, Ethan, and I don't mean metaphorically." He froze. "What? I'll tell you someday," Eleanor said softly. "But for now, try looking at her with clearer eyes. Not the ones that judge a veil, but the ones that might see a soul." That night, as the wind rattled the windows, Ethan lay awake, his mind restless. He thought of Lillian's quiet voice, her unshakable calm, the way warmth seemed to follow her into the coldest corners of the estate. And for the first time he wondered, what exactly had she done to change my mother so completely? Rain came the next afternoon, a steady curtain that turned the estate into a cathedral of dripping eaves and muted light. Ethan returned home earlier than usual, briefcase abandoned by the front door. He wasn't searching for anyone, just silence. But then he caught a sound. Voices. His mother's familiar murmur and another voice, softer. Lillian's. Drawn by instinct, he followed the sound to the sitting room, stopping just beyond the heavy velvet drapes. Inside, Eleanor reclined on the settee, a blanket over her knees. Lillian sat beside her, veil still in place, gloved hands moving gracefully as she poured tea. The fire flickered low, shadows stretching across the carpet. "You shouldn't be doing all this," Eleanor said quietly. "You've already given me more than I can ever repay." "It's no burden," Lillian replied softly. "It makes me happy to see you well." Eleanor's lips curved faintly, though her eyes shimmered with something Ethan couldn't name. "Do you know what people said after that day? They said I was lucky, but I never believed it was luck. I knew it was you." Lillian's hands froze on the teacup. "Please, Mrs. Prescott." "No." Eleanor's voice grew stronger. "I've held this secret for too long." Ethan leaned closer, breath caught in his throat. 4 years ago, Eleanor whispered, "I was crossing Beacon Street after a meeting. A car came out of nowhere. I didn't even have time to scream, and then someone shoved me out of the road. A young woman. She took the hit instead of me." The fire crackled. Lillian lowered her head, veil trembling faintly. I woke up in the hospital with only bruises, Eleanor continued. But she was gone. Left before I could thank her. No one knew her name. Not the nurses. Not anyone. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. He gripped the doorframe until his knuckles whitened. She had a cut, Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. A deep gash down her cheek. I see it every time I close my eyes. The room fell silent. The only sound was the fire. Finally, Lillian spoke, her voice so soft it almost vanished. You were safe. That was enough. Eleanor's trembling hand reached for hers. It was you, wasn't it? Lillian did not answer right away. The fire popped. Shadows bent across the walls. Then finally she whispered, It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me, Eleanor said firmly. At that moment, Ethan went rigid in the doorway. The pieces fit together at last. His mother's devotion, Lillian's silence, the veil. And the truth struck him with a terrible, undeniable clarity. He drew in a sharp breath. The sound made Lillian look up. Through the thin veil, her grey-blue eyes locked with his. For a heartbeat, the world shrank until nothing existed but the charged space between them. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Ethan stepped inside, his voice low, uneven. It was you. Lillian rose slowly, hands clasped together. You shouldn't have heard that. You saved my mother's life. His tone wavered, part disbelief, part awe. And you've been here this whole time. I did what anyone would do, she answered softly. No. Ethan shook his head. Most people wouldn't. You took the hit. You got hurt. That scar. Her gloved hand brushed faintly against the veil, as though to keep it in place. It's not something I like people to see. Ethan stared at her. The anger he'd carried for weeks breaking apart like glass. Guilt, gratitude, confusion, all tangled into something he couldn't name. All this time, he murmured, voice raw, I thought you were hiding something shameful, but you were hiding proof of your courage. Lillian lowered her eyes. No, I was hiding a reminder of what people don't always accept. Ethan couldn't find words. He only knew this. The woman he had dismissed as a burden was the same one who had given his family back its heart. The veil between them was no longer fabric. It was every lie he'd told himself about her. The days that followed were different. Not louder, not warmer, but changed. Ethan no longer looked at her as the stranger under a veil. He began to notice her. Truly notice. It started small. His coffee, black with no sugar, already waiting on the table when he came down in the morning. His coat folded neatly when he carelessly left it behind. The way she brewed calming teas when stress carved lines into his face, or left thoughtful books on his desk, essays on leadership, poems about healing. She never demanded his attention. Never forced conversation, but her presence was steady like an anchor, and Ethan found himself watching her. The way she moved quietly through the halls. Her dress is simple but graceful. The way her voice carried when she spoke, low, calm, musical. Always kind, but beneath that dignity he saw it now, something he had missed before. A loneliness that clung to her, like someone who had learned to survive with no one to lean on. One night, after a brutal day of meetings, Ethan returned home long after dark. His stomach empty, his head splitting. He brushed off Harold's concern, ignored dinner, and collapsed into his office. Numbers swam before his eyes. The room tilted, his chest tightened. And then, blackness. When he opened his eyes, the world had shifted. The curtains were drawn, the fire low. He was lying on the couch, a damp cloth cooling his forehead, a blanket tucked carefully under his arms. Lillian sat beside him in a low chair, her posture slightly hunched, as though she'd been watching him for hours. Her veil still concealed her face, but her hand rested gently over his. You're awake, she said softly, relief in every syllable. Ethan blinked, throat dry. What happened? You collapsed, she answered. Harold found you. I've been here since. He tried to sit up, but her hand pressed lightly against his shoulder. Just rest a little longer. For once he obeyed, letting his body sink back into the cushions. His gaze drifted to her, to the quiet figure bathed in firelight. Shadows danced around them, but she was steady. Why? His voice cracked. Why did you stay? She hesitated. Then, in a whisper that cut through him like truth always does, she said, Because I know what it feels like to carry everything alone." Her words struck deeper than any fever. She reached forward, adjusted the cloth on his forehead with a tenderness that made his chest ache. And for the first time, Ethan didn't look away. Her touch was light, practiced. For the first time, Ethan noticed how small her hands were, how steady. "You didn't have to," he murmured. "I know," she replied. The next morning, Ethan woke to the scent of warm bread and fresh linen. A tray sat neatly near his desk, toast, eggs, and a note in delicate cursive. "Please take today slower." He held the note longer than he meant to, the paper trembling faintly in his hand. That evening he dined with his mother. Eleanor studied him over her glass, her sharp eyes softened with something like wonder. "You look different," she said at last. "Softer." Ethan gave a dry smile. "Must be the fever," but Eleanor only smiled knowingly. "Or maybe you're finally beginning to see what's in front of you." He stared down at his plate. After a pause, he admitted in a low voice, "I don't know what it is, but I feel it." "Feel what?" she asked gently. "That I need her." Eleanor said nothing. She only reached across the table and touched his hand, a rare gesture for the woman who had raised him to be unyielding. Yet in that silence, the truth between them needed no words. It was late. The halls of the Prescott estate were cloaked in the silence that only lives at midnight. A faint wind tapped against the tall windows, and the fire in the library threw golden light across the shelves. Ethan sat in his armchair, a tumbler of scotch untouched in his hand. His phone lay abandoned on the table. For once there was nothing to check, nothing to escape into. Lillian entered quietly. She wore a soft grey robe over her nightdress, her hair unbound, the veil still falling in familiar folds around her face. She moved with calm grace, as if the house itself shifted to make room for her presence. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. His voice was rough, almost pleading. "Why do you still wear it?" She paused by the hearth, hands clasped. "I mean it," he pressed, setting down the glass. "You're not hiding from me anymore. You saved my mother. You've cared for this house. For me. So why the veil?" Lillian lowered her gaze. He stepped closer, careful, not demanding, but searching. "Are you afraid I'll see your scar and run? Is that what you think of me?" Her breath caught. Slowly she sat on the couch, eyes fixed on the fire. Her voice trembled like glass when she began. "When I was younger, I believed in fairy tale love. The kind that sees past flaws. The kind that never lets go. But after the accident," she drew a shallow breath, "there were stitches from my cheekbone to my jaw. I could hardly stand my own reflection. Still, I thought if someone loved me, they'd see past it." Ethan leaned forward, listening, his chest tight. "I was wrong." "What happened?" he asked softly. "There was someone," she whispered. "A man I trusted. We'd been together almost a year. I told him about the scar, about the pain. And when I finally let him see it, he looked at me like I had become someone else." Her voice faltered. "He said he couldn't imagine waking up next to me every day, that he'd always remember me before, and then he left." The silence that followed pressed against the walls, heavy and merciless. "I stopped letting people see me after that," she finished, voice breaking, "because I never wanted to see that look again. Not from anyone." Ethan sat back slowly, fingers laced, his heart aching. "You thought I'd react the same." "I didn't know," she admitted. "You already resented me. I didn't want to give you another reason. If you want to leave," her voice trembled. "I won't blame you." Ethan rose, each step deliberate. He lowered himself before her, knees bending until he knelt at her feet. Then gently he took her hands. She let him. "No one ever taught me," he said quietly, "that a scar could be beautiful." His voice thickened with emotion. He looked up into her veiled face. "Not until I met you." The gala was Ethan's idea, a grand affair in one of the Prescott Foundation's glittering halls, chandeliers blazing overhead. On paper, it was a charity event to raise funds for emergency medical response programs. But for Ethan, it was something else too, a stage, a moment, a chance to finally show her to the world. An idea sparked in Ethan's mind, perhaps born unconsciously from the story that had once nearly stolen his mother's. Life. The chandeliers blazed above Boston's elite. Politicians, tycoons, philanthropists filled the ballroom in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. Champagne flutes clinked, deals whispered between smiles. Ethan stood near the stage, all charm and polish, but his eyes betrayed him. Again and again they drifted toward the entrance. She hadn't arrived. Lillian had not promised she would. When he asked, she'd only smiled and said, "You'll know when I'm ready." And then, a shift. The crowd turned. Conversation thinned into ripples, then silence. At the top of the marble staircase stood Lillian. No veil. She wore a gown of deep emerald, its lines simple yet commanding, the kind of beauty that didn't shout but owned every inch of light. Her golden hair was swept into an elegant twist, revealing at last the face that had been hidden for so long. On her cheek, a scar pale but permanent, running from cheekbone to jaw. Not raw, not angry. A scar softened by time, carrying the weight of a story too large for words. Her eyes, ocean gray, were steady, unflinching. She began her descent. Not a flicker of shame in her posture. Shoulders back, chin high, every step turning whispers into awe. She's beautiful. Is that Ethan's wife? She's the one. The veiled girl. Ethan moved forward, heart hammering. At the bottom of the stairs their eyes met. She gave him the smallest, most steady smile. He reached for her hand. She gave it. Together, they walked through the parted sea of people, past photographers who, for once, lowered their cameras as if sensing they were intruding on something sacred. They stepped onto the stage. Silence deepened, heavy as prayer. Ethan turned, Lillian beside him. He drew in a breath. "Before we continue tonight," he said, voice echoing across marble and crystal, "there's something I need to say." A pause. He looked at her. She gave a tiny nod. "Permission?" He faced the crowd. "You all know my mother's story, that she survived an accident 4 years ago, but most of you don't know why she lived." His hand tightened around Lillian's. "It was because of her." Gasps rippled through the room. "She ran into traffic to save my mother's life. She was cut by glass, scarred by it. Most would have hidden forever, but she didn't. She wasn't hiding from the world because she was weak. She was hiding because the world was too blind to see what real courage looks like." His voice dropped, no longer for them, but for her. "That scar saved my mother's life. And later," he turned fully to her, eyes locked only on hers, "it saved mine too." The room erupted. Not polite claps, thunderous rising applause. Chairs scraped as people stood. But Ethan saw only her. Lillian's eyes shimmered with tears she could no longer hide. He stepped closer, his voice now a whisper meant for her alone. "You never had to prove anything, but I'm proud of you, for standing here." Her lips trembled. "This is the first time I've ever seen my scar," she whispered back. "And thought it was beautiful." Ethan brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. The crowd, though roaring, did not intrude, because they all understood. They had just witnessed something words could never quite capture. A scar once a wound, reborn as strength. A love once bound by obligation, now undeniable, now real. The world saw them differently after that night. No longer the aloof CEO and his mysterious veiled bride. Ethan and Lillian Prescott became a symbol, a reminder that beauty could be found in the broken, and that scars were not curses, but testaments. Headlines blazed for weeks. The woman behind the veil, the scar that saved a life. How a hidden bride taught a billionaire to love. And when the Golden Scar Foundation was born, it was not just a charity. It was a legacy, because their story did not end on that stage. It had only just begun. A month later, Ethan and Lillian launched the Golden Scar Foundation, a cause born from pain, but built for hope. Its mission was clear: to stand beside those living with physical trauma and visible scars, to fund reconstructive surgeries for children who had no other chance, to create mentorship programs where survivors met artists, speakers, and leaders who had turned wounds into wisdom, to change the way the world saw scars, not as shame, but as strength. At the launch, Lillian's voice was steady as she spoke. The golden scar is a reminder that what breaks us can also remake us. Scars don't make us less. They make us more, Ethan added, simply but with conviction. This foundation wouldn't exist without her. Months later, during a televised interview, a reporter asked the question millions had been waiting to hear. How did it feel, seeing your wife unveil herself for the first time? Ethan smiled, eyes soft. I already thought she was beautiful. But that night, I saw what made her extraordinary. He leaned forward, gaze piercing the camera. My wife is not disfigured. She's not brave despite her scar. She's brave because of it. That scar didn't take her beauty. It revealed it. Marrying her wasn't charity. It was the best decision of my life. Life after that changed. Their home was no longer filled with silence. Mornings became gentle rituals of shared coffee and garden walks. Evenings bloomed with soft laughter, quiet music, conversations that carried long into the night, and sometimes, when Ethan watched her reading by the fire or leading an art exhibit for survivors, he felt an ache deep in his chest. Not regret, never regret, gratitude for fate, for second chances, for finally seeing someone not for the surface, but for the soul. One golden afternoon, sunlight spilled across the veranda. Ethan and Lillian sat beneath the old oak tree, the estate hushed around them. She leaned against his shoulder, her face bare and unguarded now, catching the light like a quiet flame. She no longer wore scarves, no longer hid when cameras turned her way. Ethan brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered, cupping her cheek. His thumb traced the faded scar with reverence. He kissed it softly as though it were holy. You don't have to hide anymore, he whispered. The world will love you the way I've learned to love you, fully, deeply, without fear. Her gray-blue eyes sparkled. She smiled, not hesitantly this time, but with peace. I already feel loved, she said. And that's more than I ever dreamed. They stayed there as the sun dipped low, no words needed. Just the quiet truth between them. Love earned, love healed, love free at last. Sometimes the most beautiful parts of us are the ones we try hardest to hide. Scars do not make us less. They remind us of how strong we are. Real love sees past the surface and cherishes what lies beneath. Thank you for watching this emotional journey from pain to healing, from silence to love. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to HOA-GLORIOUS Stories for more unforgettable tales of love, resilience, and courage. Your support helps us keep bringing you stories that speak to the soul. Like, comment, and share if this story moved you. And we'll see you in the next episode, only on HOA-GLORIOUS Stories.